If you smell it outside, it smells like college football season is right around the corner. Now, that just could be because SEC Media Days are starting next week, Big Ten Media Days the week after, and after that, fall camp will be here. Teams will be back on campus. All the players will be back on campuses across the United States, and we'll have games next month. Now, we still have about a month and a half, but college football season is still right around the corner. And as you know, we don't take many breaks on this show. This is going to be a year-round college football show, and loaded show tonight. Absolutely loaded. I did touch on at the end of the last show on Tuesday that we would be talking about the SEC tonight, and that's what we're going to do. Going to be a very SEC-heavy show. I will be out of town next week, so we won't have any shows during SEC Media Day week, but that's why we have tonight, because we're going to preview the SEC as a whole. Thick stack of papers, so a lot to get to. Welcome into the Air Raid with Parker Kelley. I also wanted to say thank you to everybody that has listened so far. Thank you to everybody that has subscribed. I shared with the audience that, this is a brand new show. We started this thing about 2 weeks ago, and at the time, we had around 60 or so subscribers, and I said, okay, if we can get to 100 subscribers by the end of the month, I would consider that a win. Well, because of you guys, we have surpassed the 100 subscriber mark. I believe last time I checked, we were at 110. That doesn't happen without you guys. So appreciate everybody that's watched live, everybody that's went back and watched later, because that is the beauty of digital media. If you can't watch during when we start the show at 6 o'clock Central Time, 7 p.m. Eastern, you can always go back and watch or listen later. And it's also available on wherever you get your podcasts. So I just wanted to thank you guys, and I wanted to put that out there at the very beginning before we got started here. But again, like I said, SEC Media Days in Tampa next week. Kind of a weird location for SEC Media Days. I'm used to them being in Birmingham, Alabama. They were in Nashville one year, which was great for us because that's where we do the show from. Just doesn't feel like a central location in Tampa. But anyways, they take place next week, and by they, I mean Media Days. We're going to get to better or worse. That's actually how we're going to lead the show tonight. Better or worse record predictions for each team in the SEC. I am going to give my preseason top 10 quarterback list for the Southeastern Conference. That's going to get pretty controversial, but as you know, we don't shy away from those types of conversations on this show. We have some new coaches in the SEC. We have some dark horse contenders, and we have some new quarterbacks. We're going to get to all of that. Again, if you haven't already, please make sure that you are subscribed at Air Raid Parker Kelley. There are a couple underscores in there. You can just search Air Raid with Parker Kelley on YouTube, find it there, or my name, and you can hit that subscribe button. And if you think you're subscribed, just go ahead and double check. Doesn't sign you up for anything, just really helps out the show. We want to keep this thing free. We don't want to put it behind any type of paywall. And make sure that you are subscribed to 1025 The Game, because we have a partnership with them. We are partnered with 1025 The Game, and we want to help out the YouTube channels. So please make sure that you do that. Okay, let's get into better or worse record predictions for each team in the SEC. We're going to go in alphabetical order here. So we're not picking on any teams here. We're just going in alphabetical order, and we're going to start with Alabama, the Crimson Tide. Last year, they went 11-4. They won a playoff game, which is an improvement from year one under Kalen DeBoer, right? And year one under Kalen DeBoer, Alabama went 9-3 in the regular season. If you remember, they ended up losing the bowl game to Michigan, which made them 9-4. Last year, went 10-2 in the regular season, made the SEC championship game, beat Oklahoma in Norman in the first round of the college football playoff. Remember, they trailed by a couple of touchdowns at one point, and then they got blown out by Indiana. But who did not get blown out by Indiana last year? So Alabama finished 11-4, played 15 total games. It's the second straight season under Kalen DeBoer. I mean, he's only been there 2 years, but it's the second year that Alabama has finished the season with 4 losses. The only difference is they went further this season, right? They went to the quarterfinal of the playoffs, ended up playing Indiana in the Rose Bowl. So if I'm trying to predict what Alabama is going to go in 2026, given that they're going to have a new starter at quarterback, could be Austin Mack, could be Keelan Russell, given that I'm not exactly sure what the running game is going to look like, that was a struggle for them last year. The offensive line wasn't a great unit either. I expect the defense to be pretty good. I'm going to take the easy way out on this, and I promise I'm not going to do this for every team. But I expect Alabama to have a similar type of success in 2026. They could go 10-2 again, like they did last year. They could go 9-3 in the regular season. Now, if Alabama stays about the same, that doesn't guarantee that they will make the playoffs, but I could see them being about the same. So I am taking the easy way out on Alabama, but that is just how I see it. I do expect the ground game to improve, to pair with a somewhat inexperienced quarterback. If it's Austin Mack, he does have a little bit of experience. Remember that he showed up in that Rose Bowl game versus Indiana for the second half when Ty Simpson got hurt. But Keelan Russell is a true freshman, 5-star quarterback. Some services had him as one of the best quarterbacks. He was the Elite 11 MVP, which is a super big deal. I'm going to go about the same for Alabama. I could definitely see 10-2 there for them. Let's go to Arkansas now, the next team up in the SEC. They had a 2025 record of 2-10. Sam Pittman got fired in Fayetteville. Now they bring in Ryan Silverfield over from Memphis. The only reason that I'm saying Arkansas is going to be better this season is because it's really hard to go 2-10 again. No offense to Arkansas. They have a long ways to go. I'm not sure how Ryan Silverfield is going to do taking over an Arkansas program that really needs some rebuilding. But I do think they'll be better than 2-10. That's not saying a whole lot. They could be 3-9, and technically that is an improvement. Not saying Arkansas is going to make a bowl game this year because I don't believe that to be true. But I do think Arkansas will be better than 2-10. That could be 3-9. That could be 4-8. That's just my gut feel on them. Moving on to the next team is Auburn. 2025 record of 5-7. They missed a bowl game. Hugh Freeze was fired. Now they bring in Alex Golesh from USF, South Florida. Before that, he was the offensive coordinator at Tennessee when they had that magical season in 2022. One of the branches of the Josh Heupel tree. He now gets his first shot as a Power 4 head coach on the Plains in Auburn. I looked at Auburn's schedule earlier, and I can actually pull it up here in just a second. But I lean that Auburn is going to be slightly better just because I am a big fan of Alex Golesh. I believe that he will have success at Auburn. It may not be this season. It may not be immediate. But I believe eventually he will be able to get Auburn turned around. So if Auburn goes 6-6 and makes a bowl game this year, again, that is improvement. That's a 1-win improvement, but that gets them to a bowl game. And that could be the case for Auburn. So I think that Auburn, I could see them going 6-6 this year. Moving to the next team, Florida. Another team with a new head coach, which, by the way, we are going to get into some of the new head coaches. We're going to talk about them a little bit more in depth as we get a little bit later in the show. Florida had a record of 4-8 in 2025. They have a new head coach by the name of John Sumrall. Now, for a lot of Gator fans, there's a little bit of PTSD involved with this because Billy Napier, the guy they just fired, came from the group of 5 ranks, right? He was at Troy. Then he got hired. I'm sorry, I'm thinking of John Sumrall. Billy Napier came from Louisiana, got hired by Florida, got fired. Now he's back in the Sun Belt, the group of 5 level at James Madison. They turned to John Sumrall, who was at Troy, and then went to Tulane and then just got hired. So a lot of Gator fans have PTSD because it makes them think of Billy Napier all over again. Well, I happen to think that John Sumrall will be a better coach than Billy Napier. I don't think just because he came from the group of five automatically means that he's going to have an identical record to what Billy Napier had during his 4 seasons at Florida. I just happen to think John Sumrall is better at establishing a culture. I believe he's your prototypical football guy. And here's the truth about Florida. Here's the God's honest truth about Florida is if you look at Florida's roster, and this might be replicated when they release the preseason top 25, which, by the way, I will also release one myself once we get closer to August. If you look at Florida's roster up and down, it is filled with a bunch of blue chip guys. When I say blue chip guys, I'm talking about 5 stars, high 4 stars, low 4 stars, guys like that. Florida has easily, in my opinion, a top 25 talent roster. I believe they had that under Billy Napier as well. The thing with Billy Napier was, and one of the reasons that ultimately led to his downfall in Gainesville is he was an offensive guy, right? As a head coach, especially in today's landscape with NIL and transfer portal, you have a lot of responsibilities as a head coach. And he still wanted to call plays. It was a little stubborn in that area. Well, he found out that being a head coach means you probably can't call plays, at least at the collegiate level, right? It's too much to balance. So now we see Billy Napier at James Madison has given up play calling duties, has handed off those duties to his offensive coordinator there. John Sumrall is not an offensive guy, he's more so of a defensive guy, but again, he has a way of establishing a culture, establishing a type of physical toughness that you need, especially if you're going to be playing a 9-game SEC slate. So, again, Florida, I believe they will be improved from last year. I believe they'll at least make a bowl game. But, that again, they're probably going to be a preseason top 25 SEC team. Whether it turns out that they finish the year ranked, that's a different story. But my bet is they will be a preseason top 25 team. So I'm going to say they are better in 2026. Let's move on to Georgia. This is one of the more fun teams to talk about in the SEC. 2025, they had a record of 12-2. Now, when you have teams that have high double-digit win seasons like that, right? You think of Georgia, who had 12 wins. You think of Ole Miss, who had 13 wins last year. Georgia is the model of consistency in the SEC. If you look at Kirby Smart's record over his 10 years as the head coach of the Bulldog, which, by the way, I believe that makes him the longest tenured coach in the SEC, the longest tenured head coach. I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that's right. Kirby Smart in his 10 seasons at Georgia is 117-21 over 10 seasons. Georgia, I expect, and I'm saying the same thing with Alabama. Full disclosure, I'm taking the easy way out on this. I expect about the same for Georgia. I think it's fair to assume that they're probably going to be a national championship contender because they were last year. They returned their quarterback, Gunnar Stockton. I expect them to be improved on the defensive side of the ball. I still expect them to be able to run the ball effectively and efficiently. But if Georgia wants to make themselves a bona fide national championship contender, Gunnar Stockton, and this really shouldn't be much of a surprise at what I'm getting ready to say, Gunnar Stockton needs to improve drastically as a passer. He was already pretty good last year, but if he takes his specifically his passing game as a runner, he's very gifted. But if he can take his passing game to the next level, that's when we're having Georgia, not that we're not already, in that legit national championship conversation. But I could see Georgia. Now, they do have a tough schedule, pretty much everybody does right now in the SEC since they moved to 9 conference games. And on top of that, one of their non-conference games, Georgia Tech at the end of the year. So I expect Georgia to be about the same. I could see 11-1 in the regular season. I could see 10-2, but I definitely see Georgia making the playoffs. So that is at least what I think about Georgia for now. Let's go to Kentucky, who had a record of 5-7 last year, missed a bowl game. Mark Stoops is out in Lexington. In comes Will Stein, who was the offensive coordinator at Oregon. Let me just start out by saying, and you're going to hear me talk about this guy a lot as we get closer to the season, as we are in the season. I'm a big fan of Will Stein. Big fan of Will Stein. Big fan of what he was able to do at Oregon. Here's the beauty of the Will Stein hire in Lexington. Mark Stoops, who you just fired, was previously the longest tenured coach in the SEC. Mark Stoops is more of an old school coach, right? Will Stein is very much on the younger side. He's a part of the Dan Lanning tree, so a younger guy. This is, and I'm talking about this era of NIL and transfer portal, this is the only era that guys like Will Stein had ever known. So he's really going to lean strongly into that. They have upgraded their football facilities. They have upgraded their weight room. They've went out and they've gotten a really good transfer portal class. And Will Stein has really revamped this roster, at least in the preseason. Now we'll have to see it play out in the fall. But he's kind of leaning more so into this. Mark Stoops didn't. So Will Stein has done that, which is, I'd say it's been a great off-season, preseason for Kentucky. They went 5-7 last year. Are they better in 2026? I'm going to say they're one game better. I see them going 6-6. Again, really tough schedule. A lot of teams have really tough schedules this year in the SEC. I'm going to talk about Kentucky a little bit later on. LSU, old Lane Kiffin. Here we are again. 2025 record of 7-6. After having, I was one of them. I thought LSU was going to be a national championship contender before last season. Boy, was I wrong. Boy, was I wrong. Brian Kelley out, fired before Halloween. Finished the year 7-5 in the regular season. Lost the Texas Bowl to Houston. I mean, with the expectations surrounding LSU, with how much money they spent in the transfer portal and on this year's roster, with the hire of Lane Kiffin, if they're not better in 2026, what do you think is going to happen in Baton Rouge? I think it'll explode, not in a good way, if they're not better in 2026. So this is an easy one. LSU is going to be better in 2026. I do trust Lane Kiffin. Right now, I believe if you're tiering the head coaches in college football, you don't get too far from the very top of the list before you get to Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin, in my opinion, top 10 coach in college football. That's not a hot take or anything. Firmly in the tier 2 coaches of college football. He's going to have more resources to work with this year than he did last year in Ole Miss. And Ole Miss had some great resources, but you go to LSU, who's one of the blue bloods of the sport, you're going to have a lot more resources to work with. LSU is going to be better. Also, I have more on them in a little bit of a later segment. Mississippi State. Let's talk about the Bulldogs. So I want to start out by saying, and Mississippi State doesn't get a lot of national buzz right now. They don't get a lot of national attention, and understandably so. But I really do applaud the job that Jeff Lebby has done with Mississippi State. And you may be thinking to yourself, well, what has he won? He hasn't won much. He's won 7 games in 2 seasons. Listen, I mean, Mississippi State was in a very, very bad state when Jeff Lebby took over. First year didn't go great, but honestly, I don't think a lot of coaches could have done well with what Jeff Lebby had 2 years ago in 2024. This year, they went 5-7, so a 3-win improvement. I believe that, they started the season 4-0. It had that great win versus Arizona State in week 2. They made a bowl game. Now, I'm not a fan of teams that are 5-7 making bowl game appearances, but they made a bowl game. Mississippi State, here's a stat for you. Mississippi State was 2-3 in one possession games last season. They had some terrible luck. If you think about what happened in that game versus Tennessee in Starkville, losing in overtime, having a lead versus Florida, losing in Gainesville, and then having a double-digit lead versus Texas in your own building and losing that game. If you flip those games, right, you flip those 3 games in favor of Mississippi State, I mean, you're looking at an 8-win team. So I thought Jeff Lebby, honestly, it wasn't the greatest coaching job in the world, but I believe he deserves at least a little bit of applause for what he's been able to do, and I expect Mississippi State to be better this year. They have a quarterback by the name of Camario Taylor, which we are going to talk about when we get to the new SEC quarterbacks, because he was not their primary option last year, but he did come in relief late in the season. He's a dog. So Camario Taylor, I'm going to talk about him. I see Mississippi State making a bowl game this year at 6-6. So I know we've been saying that a lot of teams are going to improve or stay stagnant. We haven't really got to teams that are going to dip this year. Let's go to Missouri. Missouri, they had a record of 8-5 last year. What you may not realize is the guy that started the season at quarterback for Ole Miss last year, Austin Simmons, has won the starting job at Missouri. So he's going to be the starting quarterback for the Tigers this year. They return their running back, Ahmad Hardy, who was second in the nation in rushing last season, with about 1,650 on the ground. They have a great 1-2 punch at running back with Jamal Roberts, who was their second leading rusher last year. The problem is the defense doesn't return any starters from last year's team. And usually it's pretty safe to blindly trust Missouri's defense. That's not the case this season since they don't have any returning starters. So I'm going to lean about the same. The schedule, compared to most SEC teams, is manageable. I could see them going 8-4. And they would get a bowl bid. So Oklahoma. This is where we start to talk about teams that I see not being better in 2026. They were 10-3 last season. They were a top 10 team heading into the college football playoff. They hosted a game in Norman against Alabama. Didn't end up winning the game. I have a couple questions about Oklahoma. One, this isn't a question. I'm just excited about John Mateer. Because if you remember, John Mateer, when he was it was the Michigan game in week 2. After that game, that's when he really started to open the nation's eyes to what he was as a player. At that point in time, he was the Heisman favorite. And then he had the thumb injury, unfortunately, and he didn't look the same. He changed his motion a little bit this year. He's healthy. He has some good weapons to work with on the outside. But I do have a couple of questions because Oklahoma struggled with a couple of the same things that Alabama struggled with last year. They both didn't have good run games whatsoever. So is the run game going to improve for Oklahoma? What about depth at linebacker? They did lose some linebackers to the NFL. What about depth at linebacker? That's a question mark I have. Brent Venables, their head coach, very good defensive mind. He has transformed that Oklahoma defense during his time in Norman. The schedule is tougher than last year, in my personal opinion. I lean Oklahoma is going to be worse in 2025 or in 2026, excuse me. And if they're worse than 10-2 in the regular season, means they're probably not going to make the college football playoff. Ole Miss. Ole Miss went 13-2 last year, had a great season. Made it to the college football playoff semifinals despite the head coaching incident. Now, it's very rare. It is very rare that I say a team that had 13 wins last year will be better. This is not one of those cases. Remember, in the last show, we talked about the ACC. I talked about Miami, who's the national championship runner-up, how I think that they're going to be better in 2026 than they were in 2025. With Ole Miss, I do not think they will be better. One, because this is the first year that Pete Golding is going to be a head coach in the SEC. We saw a little bit of what he can do during that college football playoff run, but what can you do as the head coach in the regular season? Tough schedule. I feel like I'm saying that about every team, but it's the truth. What can Pete Golding do in his first season as a regular coach? The good news is they return what I believe to be the best quarterback in the SEC. That is a spoiler for my top 10 preseason quarterbacks in the conference. But they return Kewan Lacey at running back, who was a finalist for the best running back in the country award. Certainly, he finished top 3 in the country in rushing yards. So they return him. That's a big get. I do expect the defense to be rock solid. Receivers never really a problem at Ole Miss. Here's the truth, though. Ole Miss could be worse in 2026 and still make the playoffs. They went 11-1 in the regular season last year. If they go 10-2 with that schedule, my guess is they're in the college football playoff, and who knows what can happen after that. Big fan of Trinidad Chambliss, big fan of Kewan Lacey, big fan of that defensive front. So Ole Miss, they may be worse record-wise than they were last year, but could still very well make the college football playoff. South Carolina. Woo, you want to talk about a dip, right? Going 9-3 2 years ago in 2024, almost squeaking into the college football playoff, and then going 4-8 last year. Just kind of one of those out in the blue, smacks you right in the face. Where did that come from? Shane Beamer on the hot seat a little bit, right? That seat's starting to get a little warm for Shane Beamer. South Carolina has 2 of the very best players in college football. Lenore Sellers at quarterback, who's returning for his third full year as the starter. Dylan Stewart, who's coming off the edge, who could very well be a top 10 pick in the 2027 NFL draft. Nick Harbor on the outside, who did improve last year. Kind of one of those freaks of nature, built like a cyborg, unreal speed. He's just got to learn how to catch with his hands instead of catching with his body. If he can do that, he's going to make a drastic jump in 2026. So they have those 3 players returning. They have a new offensive coordinator by the name of Kendall Briles, who is the brother of Art Briles, who you might remember at Baylor. Kendall came from TCU. I do have to give credit to Shane Beamer for making the change at offensive coordinator. It wasn't working out with Mike Shula last year, and if the offense doesn't look really good with Lenore Sellers and Nick Harbor, kind of don't know what to tell you. I think Shane Beamer was absolutely justified in making that decision, but now they bring in a new offensive coordinator. So what can he get out of Lenore Sellers this year? Also, too, this is a name you're going to want to get familiar with. Offensive tackle Jacarius Peak came over from NC State in the transfer portal. This is a guy that was all ACC last year. Unfortunately for him, he did get hurt in February. I believe he was playing a 3-on-3 basketball tournament. So according to Shane Beamer, Jacarius Peak should be ready to go by the time the season starts in September. If he's not ready by then, expect him to be ready by late September. Does South Carolina improve? I'll lean yes, but not by much, because there's still a lot of question marks across the entire roster. And you go 4-8 last year. It's hard to have super high expectations, especially, there's a cloud of doubt around Shane Beamer's future in Columbia, South Carolina. So I see 5-7 or 6-6 for South Carolina. Let's go. Oh, man, we're almost at the 30-minute mark, and we still have a lot of show left to go. Let's go Tennessee, and we'll go rapid fire here. Tennessee had a record of 8-5 last year. The truth is, question mark at the quarterback position, right? You're going to start a guy who does not have any experience in college football. George McIntyre came in relief as the third stringer, but doesn't have a lot of experience. Or it could be Faison Brandon, who's a true freshman 5-star quarterback. The Chaz Coleman situation, just really unfortunate. For those of you who don't know, Chaz Coleman followed Jim Knowles over to Knoxville from Penn State. He's it looks like he's not going to play. Technically, he's still a part of the team. They're keeping him on scholarship, but he's been dismissed due to medical reasons. So he was going to be relied upon to be a stalwart on Tennessee's defensive line. They're not going to have him, so they may have to adjust stylistically, plug and play, some new pieces to kind of make up for that. But that's still going to be a huge gap. And plus, Jim Knowles' system, who defensive coordinator came over from Penn State, was also on that Ohio State team that won the national championship in 24. His system has been known as hard to get. So how much of a learning curve will there be for Tennessee on the defensive side? I think they're going to be worse than 8-5. That is including the bowl loss to Illinois in the Music City Bowl. I think regular season wise, Tennessee will be a little bit worse in the regular season. Texas A&M, big fan of Mike Elko. I believe he's done a great coaching job in College Station. I am very confident in the future of Texas A&M under his leadership. They went 11-2, right? 11-1 in the regular season. Hosted a playoff game versus Miami in the first round. Lost that game 10-3. Looking at their schedule, it's just hard for me to see Texas A&M replicating the type of regular season that they had last year. Last year's schedule was pretty light compared to what they'll face this year. I think they'll be worse. Again, it's kind of one of those Ole Miss situations. Texas A&M may be worse. 10-2 technically is considered worse, and they could still make the college football playoff. Texas, 2025 record of 10-3. They're getting a lot of buzz in the preseason, aren't they? Here's the truth. Book it. Texas will be a national championship contender in 2026. Texas is always going to get a lot of love, right? That just comes with the territory. Arch Manning, of course, is getting a lot of love right now. I'm going to talk about them a little bit later, but Texas is going to be a national championship contender this year, so that makes them automatically better than 10-3. Vandy had a magical season last year, right? We talk about Vandy a lot here at 102.5. Went 10-2 in the regular season. First time ever that Vanderbilt has gotten 10 wins in the regular season. Lost the bowl game to Iowa. Again, very familiar situation to what Tennessee is going to go through, right? Really highly rated quarterback in Jared Curtis. Probably going to start at quarterback. I think he is going to start at quarterback. That's not... By the way, 102.5 here at 102.5, we are the flagship station of Vanderbilt. So please don't take my word as me announcing that Jared Curtis has been named the starter, because that's not what I'm doing. But if we're reading between the lines, that's what I believe is going to happen. So, but he is a true freshman, so there will be a learning curve there. Not as much worried about the pieces on the offensive side outside of quarterback. More so a little bit questioning the defense, what that'll look like. They need to improve from what they were last year. Not a kind schedule for Vanderbilt, so I'm leaning worse. I'm leaning worse in 2026 for the Vanderbilt Commodores. All right. This is really what I wanted to – this is going to be one of my favorite segments on tonight's show. I previewed this in a tweet that I sent out earlier that tonight, and actually in a couple of moments, I'm releasing my preseason edition. Highlight that word preseason. I reserve the right to be wrong. I reserve the right to change these after the season is played out. We could even do this midway through the season. My preseason top 10 quarterbacks in the SEC. We'll start from 10. We'll work our way to 1. Kamario Taylor at number 10, Mississippi State. For the SEC, if you're looking at the new quarterbacks in this conference this year, there are 10 new quarterbacks in the Southeastern Conference this year. Only 6 returners. When I say returners, I'm talking about guys that played on the team that they're with right now last year, because there will be guys like Sam Levitt at LSU who are not new to college football. They're just new to the SEC, new to LSU. So full disclosure there. Kamario Taylor at number 10 for Mississippi State. This is a very gifted runner. He had 173 yards rushing in the Egg Bowl versus Ole Miss when he got the start. but he does need to improve as a passer because he completed under 56% of his passes last year. But just because of how gifted he is as a runner, how electric he can be in the open field, will Jeff Lebby be able to improve him as a passer? Given the type of offense Jeff Lebby runs, given the type of receivers that they have at Mississippi State, I'd be willing to bet yes. So I have Kamario Taylor at number 10. At number 9, this is a one of those transfer quarterbacks, Austin Simmons at Missouri. This is a guy who Lane Kiffin deemed the starting quarterback in Oxford last year to start out the season. Austin Simmons got hurt. In came Trinidad Chambliss. Trinidad took that job by the throat, never looked back. But this was a guy that was good enough, at least, in the preseason last year, to beat out Trinidad Chambliss and start at quarterback for Ole Miss. He has a new location. He'll be working with Eli Drinkwitz in Columbia, Missouri. So I have Austin Simmons at number 9. At number 8, Byron Brown, transfer from USF, followed his head coach Alex Golish over to the Plains in Auburn. Byron Brown, it was one of the more fascinating guys to watch at the group of 6 level last year. Had over 4,000 total yards, led the country in most yards from a quarterback, had 42 touchdowns. 1,000 of those yards were accounted for on the ground, 14 touchdowns rather in the run game as well. Very electric runner, adequate as a passer. I'd like to see some improvement there, but given that Alex Golish brought a couple of his receivers over from USF, there should be some continuity there. Byron Brown doesn't have to learn a new offense, doesn't have to learn a new scheme, so that'll be an advantage as he gets adjusted to the SEC. At number 7, I have Marcel Reed from Texas A&M. Marcel Reed had some really good games down the stretch of the regular season. Another one of those really electric runners, kind of reminds you of what Lamar, I'm not comparing him to Lamar Jackson necessarily. As a runner, yes, there are a lot of similarities given the speed that Marcel Reed has, given the size and frame. If you look at Lamar Jackson, his frame, what he was at Louisville, kind of how skinny he was, Marcel Reed is on the skinnier side as well. I would like to see some improvement as a passer for Marcel Reed. And if I'm being frank, if I'm being honest, I don't know how much more improvement there is for Marcel Reed as a passer. So I'd be interested to see how that goes. But as of right now, he's good enough to be number 7 on this list. At number 6, I have Lenore Sellers from South Carolina. This doesn't guarantee anything, right? This doesn't guarantee that South Carolina is going to be any good this year. They could be bad, and Shane Beamer could be on his way out the door. Some would say that Shane Beamer already has one leg out the door. But for Lenore Sellers, it's no secret that the talent that this kid has, a lot of people think that this guy's going to be a first-round pick in the NFL draft. So I have Lenore Sellers at 6. The arm strength, the big body, the frame, the ability to run the football, it's pretty clear why I'd have him at 6. Now we're getting in the top 5. At number 5, I have Sam Leavitt of LSU. Another dual threat guy. You're going to see a lot of dual threat guys on this list. Started his career at Michigan State, played a couple of seasons in Tempe, Arizona with Arizona State. Was really good, right? You remember that year in 24 with Cam Skattebo where they had a first-round bye in the college football playoff. They took Texas to the ropes, almost won that game if it wasn't for a long 4th down conversion from Texas. Sam Leavitt at LSU. Lane Kiffin is a QB guru, and now he gets one of the best guys that there is in the country, one of the highest-rated transfer portal quarterbacks that there were. I think he was right behind Brennan Sorsby, and he's going to LSU to work with Lane Kiffin. So I have Sam Leavitt at number 5. At number 4, I have Gunnar Stockton at Georgia. Gunnar Stockton, I believe he finished top 10 in the Heisman voting last year. If my memory serves correct, he was either at 7 or 8. Gunnar Stockton, if he improves a little bit as a passer, Georgia is very well in the national championship conversation. Very well in the national championship conversation if they're not already. So I have Gunnar Stockton at number 4. At number 3, I have John Mateer from Oklahoma, a guy that we don't really know what last season would have looked like if he didn't have the thumb injury. But he is healthy this year. He's changed his throwing motion a little bit. John Mateer is one of those guys that had more of a sidearm type release. A lot of his footballs got batted down at the line of scrimmage. He has changed his motion a little bit, doesn't have as much of that sidearm release. But I'm excited to see what John Mateer can do. Remember, his offensive coordinator, Ben Arbuckle, came with John Mateer from Washington State, where Mateer transferred from, to Norman. It's the system that John Mateer's run for the last 3-4 seasons. John Mateer might even be a first-round NFL quarterback as well. So I have John Mateer at number 3. At number 2, I have a guy that isn't getting enough buzz, Arch Manning. I have Arch Manning at number 2. He did not start last year out great. That's true. But as you watched Texas throughout the season, as we got closer and closer to November, you could see the improvement from Arch Manning. The talent is there, right? He was a former 5-star coming out of college, right? He had some time to sit behind Quinn Ewers his first couple of seasons at Texas. Texas went all in. They went all in on 2026, right? Getting guys, not just high-rated players from the portal, but they got high-rated players who are experienced players to surround Arch Manning with. Cam Coleman, coming over from Auburn, is a top 3, 4, 5 receiver in college football. They already have Ryan Wingo there. They have a 1-2 punch at running back. They're going to have a good offensive line. So Arch Manning, he really doesn't have a whole lot of excuses to not have a great year this year. So I have Arch Manning at number 2, and at number 1, Trinidad Chambliss from Ole Miss. What a season it was for him last year. What a story it was. Starting at Ferris State, a Division II school, winning a national championship, coming in. Lane Kiffin, when he recruited him, we all thought he was going to be a backup. We all thought he was being recruited to be Austin Simmons' backup. But he was ready when his number was called upon. He took that job by the horns, never gave it back, and it was a phenomenal year for Trinidad Chambliss. And the more I watch this guy, I'm just like, best quarterback in the SEC. He's the best quarterback in the SEC. And I'm very excited to watch what he does this year. I'm very excited to see what Ole Miss can do in year 1 under Pete Golding. So that is the list. I will put it out on social media later for those of you that want to check that out. I also probably will clip that and put it out on my YouTube as well. So make sure that you are subscribed to the channel so that you can see that just in case you missed it, and I'll also put it out on the socials. Let's talk about some of the new coaches in the SEC. There are 6 new coaches in the conference. Lane Kiffin at LSU, Alex Golesh at Auburn, John Sumrall at Florida, Will Stein at Kentucky, Ryan Silverfield at Arkansas, and Pete Golding, kind of new, right? He was the defensive coordinator, got promoted to head coach when Lane Kiffin took the head coaching job at LSU. I wanted to touch on Lane Kiffin first because expectations are sky high for LSU, right? They're, I guess, people consider LSU one of the villains of college football because of Lane Kiffin. That's understandable given his history. I will not fault you if you're saying that. But I do want to kind of get out in front of an issue, something that I've been noticing, and I've been having a lot of conversations with people about LSU. It's no secret that LSU spent, the number that I've heard is anywhere between $45 to $47 million on this year's roster. So I have heard that number from people. I do just want to say something. Just because you go to the store, you go to the grocery store, and you buy ingredients doesn't mean the meal is always going to be good, right? I could go out to my local grocery store, and I could buy all the ingredients. I could buy all the food in that place. But if I'm not a good cook, it doesn't really matter, right? Because eventually I gotta put the meal together. Now, Do I think Lane Kiffin and LSU are going to be a lot better than they were last year with Brian Kelley? Absolutely. I may even pick LSU to go to the playoff. But I do just want to say, because I hear people say, well, they spent a lot of money this year, so they got to be good. Let me remind you of something that happened 2 years ago. Do you remember when Florida State had that undefeated regular season, won the ACC, got left out of the 4-team playoff in the final era of the 4-team, and the next year they went 2-10? Do you remember that year? Florida State spent a lot of money on that team. The problem with Florida State is they're very reliant on the transfer portal. They just happened to really hit on a lot of guys that year they went undefeated. The next year they approached it the same way, played a little portal roulette, and it didn't work out for them. It backfired. They went 2-10. LSU relied heavily on the portal this year, not comparing LSU to Florida State. But Lane Kiffin has to cook the meal with the ingredients, and there are plenty of them. There are a lot of blue-chip guys on this roster. LSU killed it in the transfer portal. I believe they were definitely a top 5 class, either 2 or 3, depending on which service you look at. So Lane Kiffin has to cook the meal now, which I honestly have confidence that he will. For Alex Golesh at Auburn, I do like Alex Golesh. I thought this was a home run hire for Auburn. Let me give you a little inside baseball on Alex Golesh. He's of Russian heritage. Him and his family escaped communism in Russia when he was 7 years old, and they came over to the United States. That's all you need to know about that guy. That guy will do anything possible to accomplish what he wants to accomplish. Big fan of Alex Golesh. Big fan. I do believe Auburn knocked it out of the park with that hire. So Alex Golesh imported a lot of his guys from USF to the Plains in Auburn. Will they be able to make that jump? Given the schedule, it's hard for me to see Auburn being a top 25 team. It's hard for me to see them making the playoff or anything further than that. But I do believe they can surprise some people in year one under Alex Golesh. Another guy that I'm really high on is John Summerall, right? Florida has the pieces to be a really good football team. They haven't named a starter at quarterback yet. I'll get to that a little bit later. But they have a very good running back. All SEC guy in Jaden Ball, who they convinced to stay despite the coaching change. Florida may have the best trio of wide receivers in college football, and I'm not even kidding when I say that. Eric Singleton, who was actually at Auburn last year, came to Florida. Prior to that, he was at Georgia Tech. The reason he came to Florida is because Florida has a new offensive coordinator in Buster Faulkner, who came over from Georgia Tech. And by the way, Georgia Tech was a top 15 team in the country in terms of total offense at around 500 yards per game. It was absurd. So if Florida has one of the best trios of wide receiver, right, Dallas Wilson, who was a former 5-star, he was a true freshman last year. He returns for his sophomore season. Vernell Brown. I mean, seriously, you do some digging into this Florida roster, and it's a top 25 roster. So John Summerall has a lot of pieces to work with. Florida could be one of those teams that surprises people this year. Will Stein at Kentucky is another new coach. Has completely leaned in to the transfer portal, kind of overnight revamped this Kentucky roster. He's doing everything he can to upgrade the facilities, right? I believe Kentucky is trying to be more than a basketball school, although basketball season hasn't been the kindest to them over the last few years. I believe they're trying to lean into being more than just a basketball school. They're significantly upgrading the football budget, the football facilities. Will Stein is going to have pieces to work with. A new quarterback, Kenny Minchie, who I will also talk about a little bit later, transfer from Notre Dame. I believe he's a very talented player, so excited to see what he can do in Will Stein's offense. Ryan Silverfield at Arkansas has a lot tougher challenge on his plate because Arkansas is down in the dumps, right? They are bottom of the barrel in the SEC right now. That is going to be a tougher turnaround for Ryan Silverfield. I don't envy him for being in that position. He did have a lot of success at Memphis. So wish him nothing but the best, but we'll have to see what happens. And Pete Golding, again, I hit on it in the last segment, but what can he do in year one as a head coach, not just in the playoff, not just in the college football playoff, but what can he do in the regular season? So you have 6 new coaches in the SEC. My dark horses, I'm going to be honest, guys. I've been harping on them really all show, but it's Florida. Florida is my dark horse in the SEC. Expect the AP to have them as a preseason top 25 team. I may hold out on that, but they'll certainly be close, on the outside looking in. The talent roster is certainly not the problem. What does John Sumrall and co. do, right? New offensive coordinator Buster Faulkner, new defensive coordinator Brad White, who came over from Kentucky. Florida, if I had to pick a team for this season to surprise people in the SEC, that's who it is. I almost considered Auburn, but schedule made me a little reluctant. I'm going to pick one team for the future who I could believe to be a future dark horse team in the SEC, and that's the Kentucky Wildcats. Again, that success may not be imminent. It may not be right now. It may not even be in year 2. But I see 3-4 years down the road from right now, I could see, and don't call me crazy, because if I would have told you at the beginning of last year that Indiana was going to go 16-0, win the Big Ten, blow out almost every team they play in the college football playoff, and win a national championship, you would have called me crazy. To me, that was the greatest story in college football. The Indiana Hoosiers of 25-26, that is the greatest story in college football. And I don't even think that's recency bias. Can Kentucky do a similar thing? I'm not going to say, I'm not going to go as far as to say that. But here's what I am going to say. I do think Kentucky can be a playoff contender within the next 3 or 4 years. I do. I am that high on Will Stein. I am that high on I believe he's going to modernize Kentucky football. He's done a great job of modernizing them already, and they haven't even played a game yet. So I do believe Kentucky can be a playoff contender within the next 3 or 4 years. That's why I have one SEC dark horse for now and one for the future. I'm picking Florida to be my dark horse this season and Kentucky for a few years down the road. So new quarterbacks in the SEC, and this is actually how I'm going to end tonight's show. Alabama, there's going to be a quarterback battle there between Austin Mack and Keelan Russell. Now, Austin Mack he followed Kalen DeBoer over from Washington. He's been in his system for the last 3 years, so he does have the advantage over Keelan Russell in that aspect, but he didn't, at least from the sounds of it. Austin Mack, who is a big guy, he's 6'6", he's about 235, really big arm, can run the football if need be. But from what I've heard and from what I've read, Keelan Russell did have the better spring. Keelan Russell is one of those guys that, if you go look at Heisman odds right now, you'll see Keelan Russell's name in there. And I do think he'll win the starting quarterback job. So mark me down as having said Keelan Russell will be the starting quarterback for Alabama in 2026. Arkansas. This one is much more under the radar than Alabama's quarterback battle is. KJ Jackson and AJ Hill. KJ Jackson is a returning player. Got a little bit of play time. Not much last year because they still had Taven Jackson. But KJ Jackson does return from last year's team. He'll be a sophomore. AJ Hill followed Coach Ryan Silverfield from Memphis. I expect KJ Jackson to win this battle, but it's certainly going to be one of those not under the radar, but it's just not getting a lot of national attention. But Arkansas is not going to get a lot of that right now, given how last year went for them. Auburn, Byron Brown, who we just talked about, right? These are his stats from last year. Total yardage, 4,166. Led the country for quarterbacks. 42 touchdowns. But Byron Brown's strength is his legs. Over 1,000 yards rushing, 14 on the ground. I think he's an adequate passer. But in an Alex Golish system, you have to be able to take shots, and they'll take plenty of shots. But a large part of their offense is going to be Byron Brown running the football. So he's going to be a guy that you're going to want to watch in the SEC in 2026. Florida, there's a quarterback battle going on there. Aaron Philo, a transfer from Georgia Tech, or Tramel Jones, who is a guy that Florida recruited and really highly rated prospect coming out of high school. Wasn't a 5-star, but I believe he was a high-end 4-star. Again, I just talked about how good their receiving core is. What Buster Faulkner was able to do at Georgia Tech, the 12th ranked offense in the country, over 460 yards per game. Florida's offense last year ranked in the hundreds at 341. So big gap there. Buster Faulkner, now Aaron Philo wasn't their starter at Georgia Tech last year. He was behind Haynes King. But Aaron Philo is still a really talented kid. I expect Aaron Philo to win this job. And the fact that he doesn't have to learn a new scheme, doesn't have to learn a new system, the same system that he played in last year carries over to where he is in Gainesville now, I think that gives him the edge. So I think Aaron Philo will be the starter for Florida this year. Kentucky, Kenny Minchey is going to be the starter there. They got him out of the transfer portal from Notre Dame. Kenny Minchey was originally committed to Nebraska. And at the 11th hour, he broke every Husker's heart as he flipped his commitment to Kentucky. Will Stein came in off the Raptors, and boom, Kenny Minchey, Big Blue. Welcome to Big Blue Nation. So what Will Stein was able to do at Oregon, he's bringing over the offense, right? Very high tempo, really get the ball out. In an Oregon-style offense, the quarterback serves as more of a point guard, meaning he takes the throws when they're there. They get the ball out of their hands quickly. So that's going to be very conducive for really any quarterback, especially a guy that doesn't have a whole lot of experience like Kenny Minchey. Kenny Minchey has been around for 3 years and mostly came in relief duty, but that's going to be very conducive. And their new offensive coordinator, Joe Sloan, who was the wide receivers coach at LSU last year, they're going to have a mixture of what LSU ran last year, mixed with primarily what Oregon did last year. That's going to be Kentucky's offense in a nutshell. Again, lots of high tempo. So very different from what Mark Stoops' offenses looked like at Kentucky, right? If you watch Kentucky under Mark Stoops, it was a lot of running the football, milking the clock, getting the play in very, very last second, running that play clock down, running the game clock down. Going to be very different under Will Stein at Kentucky, who is an offensive guy. LSU, Sam Leavitt. This one is pretty self-explanatory. One of the higher-rated quarterbacks in the transfer portal gets to work with Lane Kiffin this year. Lane Kiffin just knows how to work with quarterbacks. And when was the last time a quarterback didn't put up gaudy numbers in a Lane Kiffin offense? So Sam Leavitt at LSU, new quarterback. Kamario Taylor at Mississippi State played a little bit last year, played in the bowl game versus, I believe it was Wake Forest, played in the Egg Bowl, had 173 yards on the ground in that game. The running is not what I'm worried about. And I promise you, if you watch Kamario Taylor and you go back and watch some of his games from last year and you see his running ability, it jumps off the screen. But as a passer, 55.8% of his passes were complete in about 77 attempts. So he's going to have to improve as a passer. I mean, that's just bottom line. Missouri, Austin Simmons. Again, this was the guy that Lane Kiffin named as the starter ahead of Trinidad Chambliss last year. So there was a lot of belief in Austin Simmons, but when Trinidad Chambliss took that job, he transferred to Missouri. Eli Drinkwitz has named him as the starting quarterback. He beat out Matt Zollers. So Austin Simmons at Missouri. Let's talk about the two teams that are in the state here. Tennessee, they're going to have this has been one of the talks. It's actually been the main topic of conversation in Knoxville as Faison Brandon and George McIntyre are battling for that QB1 spot. George McIntyre, at least on paper, had the edge in this competition, right? Given that he had been in the offense for a year, didn't play a whole lot, but I mean, when you're at least in the classroom, in the film room, in that quarterback room longer than a guy like Faison Brandon, you have a little bit of an edge there, a little bit of a leg up. But George McIntyre did not pull away from Faison Brandon during the spring, which should make you raise some eyebrows at Faison Brandon, who has all the talent of the world, or else, he wouldn't have been a 5-star coming out of high school. Physically, very gifted athlete. Looks like if you're looking at Faison Brandon from a physical standpoint, he looks like a junior in high school already, or a junior in college already. So that's a really good thing for Faison Brandon. So honestly, if I had to pick a quarterback today who I thought was going to start in Knoxville next season, it would be Faison Brandon. So that's going to be something to keep an eye out on. And I promise you, Josh Heupel's not going to give anything away. I promise you that Josh Heupel is playing this thing very close to the vest until the very last possible second, and then he'll announce a starter, and then we can react accordingly. For Vanderbilt, Jared Curtis, I believe 24/7, maybe even on 3, had this guy as the number 1 quarterback coming out of high school. He played locally here in Nashville at Nashville Christian. Actually played in the same classification that I did in high school, right? I played at DCA. We played Nashville Christian quite a bit. Actually played him in the state championship game a few years back. Jared Curtis, I've watched this guy up close and personal. Physically, there will be a curve, but physically, if you were to build a quarterback in a lab, he would look like Jared Curtis. Very gifted for an 18-year-old. I'm interested to see mentally what that learning curve is for him, because regardless of what classification you come from in high school, going to play in the SEC is a lot different. The windows, the throwing windows, they get a lot tinier. Everything is sped up, right? The athletes are a lot bigger, a lot faster on the other side of the football. It doesn't matter what you could have played at IMG Academy. You could have played for a homeschooled team. If you're going to play college football in the SEC, there's going to be a curve. So what is that curve for Jared Curtis? How quickly does he get adjusted for it? A lot of people discount Vanderbilt just because Diego Pavia isn't on the roster anymore. But, I mean, Jared Curtis physically is one of the more – he's one of the most talented quarterbacks I've seen come out of the state of Tennessee. So that should tell you something. But Clark Lee has not named a starter yet at Vanderbilt. Blaze Berlowitz technically is still in this thing, although a lot of us don't think that he will be the starter. So 10 new quarterbacks will be in the SEC this year, and that wraps up our show for tonight. Really appreciate all of you that have watched live. Remember, you can leave comments throughout the show. I do see them, and I can get to them. We still have about a month and a half before games are being played, so we do have time to get to comments. If you tag me on Twitter with questions, we may even open up the mailbag here pretty soon. Take your questions on the show. I just want to thank everybody that is subscribed to the channel. I want to thank everybody that's watched live, because the show channel analytics are way better than I expected they would be at this point in time. Again, this show is 2 weeks old, and I just continue to be blown away by how well the channel has done up to this point. And the truth is, we still have a long ways to go, but we got to start somewhere. So I really appreciate everybody that's watched live. Remember, no show next week. I'll be out of town, be on a little bit of a vacation. We will have a show the following week. We'll have 2 shows, Tuesday, Thursday, and then once the season gets here, we're going to ramp this thing up to 3 shows a week. And we're going to be wall-to-wall college football, and it's going to be a fun time. Hope you'll join us then. In the meantime, take care. Enjoy the rest of your July. Football will be here before you know it. God bless. We'll talk to you soon.